Hello, and welcome to Vintage Horror Movies, where we provide commentary, analysis, and critiques of older horror movies. Last time we talked about Metropolis, so this time I wanted to look at another Fritz Lang movie, and that's 1931's M. This again was written by Fritz Lang and his wife Thea von Harbou, starring Peter Lorre as Hans Beckert, Otto Wernicke as Inspector Karl Lohmann, Gustav Grungens as the safecracker. This is Lang's first sound movie and one of the earliest examples of a police procedural, and also one of the earliest examples of a serial killer movie. The original film was 117 minutes long, and it was produced by the Nero Film Company. There was a 1951 remake, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Most of what I'm going to say here involves the 1931 movie. The movie is available on the Internet Archive and possibly other subscription services like Criterion or TCM. I don't have subscriptions to those. It's not listed in the usual spots like Tubi, Pluto, etc. And it's kind of hard to search on because since it's just one letter in the title, it kind of the search doesn't really know what to do with that. But definitely check it out in the Internet Archive. Rotten Tomatoes score, critics gave it 100%, audiences gave it a 95%, so you can't beat that. And I'm not sure if this movie's in the public domain or not. I saw somewhere that it said a failure of the copyright holder to renew it caused it to go into public domain. If that's not true, it would expire from public domain since it was made in 1931 on January the 1st, 1927. The basic plot. In Berlin, a group of children are playing a game in an apartment courtyard, and the game is kind of like Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, except that the words involve a serial killer or killer coming to kill the children, so that's pretty macabre. And we see a woman, Mrs. Beckman, preparing lunch for her daughter. We also see a wanted poster warning of a serial killer that preys on children. And then when we're first introduced to the killer, we don't even see him. We actually just see a shadow of him. So that's a pretty cool visual. And he's whistling the tune from the Hall of the Mountain King. He seems to get kids to trust him by buying them balloons or candy or something like that. Here he is with one child where he actually had a knife, but he dropped the knife and she's so trusting she just gave it back to him. So we see that he encounters Elise with her ball, and then the next scene we see her ball on the ground, and we see the balloon that he got her stuck in the electrical wires overhead. So sadly, she will never be coming home again. So we know who the killer is right up front in this movie. It's Hans Beckert. And he's also, besides killing children, writing letters to the newspaper taunting them, which of course is reminiscent of Zodiac or BTK. The police are doing everything they can to find him, but they're not having a lot of luck. They have a few clues, but they're also shaking down all the criminals, which is really cramping their style. They're raiding bars and they're generally harassing people. So the criminal syndicate decides that they're going to find the killer instead, since the police aren't doing such a great job. So the criminal syndicate group is headed by the safecracker, and the group is called, I'm going to mess it up, it's Ringvereine. So Ringvereine. And they're a group of criminals who recognize each other on the street by their signet rings. And this actually was a group of criminals in Germany at that time. So after a lot of footwork, they managed to corner the guy. And then a blind vendor who sold him the balloon at the beginning of the movie recognizes him from his whistling when he is buying a balloon for another child. And then he signals to another guy there, and then the guy chalks his hand with the letter M, then goes up behind the guy, slaps him on the back so the letter M is on his back, which I thought was pretty ingenious so they can keep track of him. And of course, he did not know that the M was on his back until the child he was with, who I'm sure he planned to kill, told him about it. So that was pretty cool. So after they capture him, there's a trial, and the mob, angry mob, there's a trial, but the trial is just among the criminals. So the angry mob, of course, wants to kill him. So here is the safecracker pointing to a picture of another child that he's killed. And it looks like there's like 200 people, several hundred people in this underground area where they're trialing him. They've also given Hans a lawyer. So it's some drunk, I think it's a real lawyer, I don't know, some drunk guy that belongs to the syndicate who is there to defend him. And Hans says that he cannot help himself. He gives an impassioned speech that he does not remember what happened, and he says, quote, "I have no control over this evil thing inside of me, the fire, the voices, the torment." And his lawyer also does a pretty good job of trying to convince everyone that the law must be upheld and that this man should not be killed because he's insane. So they don't really buy it, and right before they're about to kill Hans, the police show up, and you think there's going to be a trial, but actually, we never see the trial. We see the last scene of the movie is three mothers who their children have been killed, and one of the mothers looks at the camera and says, quote, "No sentence will bring the dead children back. One has to keep closer watch over the children." And then she says, "All of you," looking, breaking the fourth wall and looking at the camera. So that's the end of that movie. So I kind of was surprised that we did not see the trial, because I guess I've watched too many Law and Order episodes where we see the trial. But anyway, on to the trivia. So obviously most of this trivia is going to be about the 1931 version, with just a few things thrown in about the 1951 version. So M is short for mortar, M-O-R-D-E-R, which is the German word for murderer. M is one of three movies with the shortest title. The others are Z from 1969 and R from 2010. The original title of the movie was A Murderer Among Us. There are German, English, and French versions of the original movie, and there are also different cuts with different scenes added or removed. It was common in 1931 to do different versions of the same film back to back. So Lorre, for instance, recorded his impassioned speech in German, English, and French. Lang was injured fighting in World War I and lost sight in one of his eyes and wore an eye patch after that. This was Peter Lorre's third film. Before M, he was known as a comedic actor, and after this movie, he fled the Nazis and got a role in Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1934, and he learned his lines for that movie phonetically. Lorre, of course, is a very recognized actor. He had been in some 80 films in his career, including 5 with Humphrey Bogart, The Maltese Falcon, and Casablanca, several with Vincent Price. I think that was with Roger Corman. Um, and he typically was typecast as a bad guy. The original movie features many cinematic innovations, including long tracking shots, a musical, I'm not sure how to say that, leitmotif, Leitmotif, so when he whistles the Hall of the Mountain King. And in opera, a leitmotif is a recurring melody that's associated with a person, situation, or idea. Also, the use of voice-over narration was groundbreaking at the time the movie came out, and the movie also features lots of shadows and innovative lighting techniques. 2/3 of the movie was shot in sound, 1/3 without. Sound equipment was very expensive at the time, but Lang said he liked the effect of switching between both. Themes in this movie include moral decay, paranoia, the justice system, mob rule, and the need to protect children. The police employ a number of techniques and handwriting analysis, which was fairly new at the time. So here's a video of a guy sitting in front of a way blown up fingerprint. So this is a very cool visual. M was shot in 6 months, and that's a big change from Metropolis, his previous movie, which I think was 17 months, something like that. It was a long time. Both versions of these movies were produced by Seymour Nebenzahl, and his son Harold was associate producer on the 1951 version. Harold also executive produced the restoration of the 1951 movie, which happened in 2015. Lang met several child killers before making the movie, but he said he did not base the character of Hans on any particular person. So, two German serial killers were mentioned. That's George Karl Grobman, who killed up to 50 women, and Fritz Harman, known as the Butcher of Hanover, that killed at least 24 men. Fritz employed several real life criminals as extras. Eventually, 25 cast members were arrested during the film shooting. And as I mentioned, we don't see any violence in the movie. We only see the scenes leading up to the children being killed. This is one instance where the imagination is much worse than actually seeing the acts. In Germany, the Nazis banned this film in July of 1934. Lang continued his rough treatment of actors, as was mentioned in Metropolis. Lorre was thrown down the cellar steps at least a dozen times, and when Lang tried to use him for another movie some 2 decades later, Lorre refused. Can't blame him. At one point, I think it looks like his knee is really hurt because he's grabbing his knee right before his impassioned speech, so it looks like the poor guy's in real pain. Joseph, I think it's Losey, Losey, Lucy, didn't want to be the director of the remake of M. That was his third movie, and he only took it because he was broke and needed the money. An added bonus, the 1951 version, also shows actual scenes of what downtown LA looked like at that time, which is pretty cool. I don't think there are a lot of scenes of that. In the original film, the scenes with the kangaroo court, the mob, is that I think that's meant to speak about mob rule. Um, and it really has a very different interpretation when you think about what was happening at the time that movie was made. So the Nazi Party was quickly rising to power right after that movie was made. And I already said Peter Lorre fled from Germany right after the film's release. And I said during Metropolis that Lang also left some 2 years later. Lang considers this his magnus opus, so this is what he considers his best movie of all of those he's done, which is interesting. I thought he would have probably picked Metropolis, but he picked M. The interesting part, as I just alluded to, about these two movies is the first was done right before the Nazis took power in Germany, and also the second was done during what was called the Red Scare in the United States. And that's when there were anti communist witch hunts occurring thanks to Senator Joseph McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Commission, HUAC. So they were searching for communist sympathizers to blacklist and throwing them out of Hollywood and making sure that they couldn't work anywhere. So several of the actors, besides the director, several of the actors and crew of the 1951 version ended up being blacklisted. And people even boycotted, in some cities, the movie because of Lousey's political views. And he fled to Europe right after the making of this film. So you have Lorre and Lang fleeing Germany for the U.S. after their movie. Then you have Lousey fleeing the U.S. for Europe after his movie. So a lot of interesting parallels there. The 1931 version is, of course, an example of German expressionist art, while the 1951 version is considered film noir. And then what you're seeing here on the screen, this is typically a hand with the letter M on it, was used for a lot of the publicity photos for the movie. Should you watch these movies? Yes, I think so. I enjoyed both movies. I would suggest watching both of them, but if you can't, just watch the first one for sure, considering it's one of the best listed as one of the best films of all time and had a great influence on modern crime and thriller fiction. I will say it is long though. If you watch the original version, I got a little bored in the middle. And if you watch the US version, it's shorter, but I think it loses some of its zest. So, um, yeah, definitely check out both of them. So that's it for M. I'd be interested to hear what you think of the movie, so please let me know in the comments. Please rate, review, and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. We need all the help we can get. And until next time, don't let your kid around anyone who whistles. And with that, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.